A great welcome to all our guests for today. Thank you for attending this Tech Talk session organized by MIMOS, which is a strategy agency under the Ministry of Science and Technology in Malaysia. As for today, we have two talks for today that have been arranged. We are glad to invite two of our speakers, Philips from Clarivate, as well as Wan Azima from MIMOS itself. Before we present, do allow me to go through. We have two sessions for today, and the Q&A session will be at the end of the both two presentation. Before I proceed, do allow me to introduce the first speaker for today from Clarivate, Mr. Philips. He is the Director of IP Business Consulting at Clarivate. He has led a team of international trusted IP advisors who helps the clients across various industry as well as sectors to optimize their IP strategy, process, and outcomes through technology, services, data, and best practices. With over 10 years of experience in the field of IP, he has a strong background of IP management, biochemistry, patent, trademark law, and innovation and commercialization. And as for today, his topic entitled Identify Emerging Technologies and Research Impact and Digital Health. With this, I pass the presentation to Philips. Philips, thank you.
Thank you very much, Simon, and thank you everyone for joining today in person or remote. Let me just get the presentation ready, and then we can start. So today we'll be looking at identifying emerging technologies and research impact in digital health, a brief bit of background on the department that I sit in within Clarivate. So I sit within our newly formed Centre for IP and Innovation Research, and in short, we're looking at how do different topics affect research organizations, policy setters, corporations, and academia. And this is spanning various different data sets, but we're looking at the big questions that come to us, really that cut across different technology areas and the intersection of research and policy. So we'll be looking at an example today that we published quite recently and seeing how the emerging technologies affect the area of digital health. And I'm joining you today from London, so thank you very much for the invitation from MIMOS. Okay, so what we're going to be going through today is looking at the case study of convergence in digital health. We're then going to be looking at how to utilize different data sets, so research and innovation data, then looking at the trends and drivers within the space, whether and how AI is being utilized within the digital health area, key innovators, who's contributing the most from a research and invention point of view. Then we'll be looking at tracing impact of academic research. So what is the impact? How do we measure this? How is it different in digital health to other spaces? And then a little bit at the end, which will lead more into Azima's area, into how to actually look at mapping trends to national strategy and what metrics and insight you can use to evaluate how and where to spend research funding and which technologies in the ecosystem. So looking at the space, particularly within digital health, we think there are 5 different themes of drivers in all technology areas that are causing innovation at the moment. So there is a trend and innovation impact and an input around sustainability. There is the area of well-being cutting across more than the health and wellness space. Connectivity is probably the most familiar one, especially for the MIMOS area, focusing in this technical discipline, looking at spaces from automotive all the way through to consumer goods, into telecoms, and we'll be looking at it today from a digital health aspect. Automation is again a driver which is affecting every single industry, and mobility is also a key driver, especially in many industries such as large supply chains, but also transport sectors. When we look at the space of digital health, the WHO's definition of this area is the field of knowledge and practice associated with the development and use of digital technologies to improve health. That's the short part of the definition. So where we would place digital health on these 5 drivers around research and innovation is actually quite close to well-being, given the purpose of the overall technologies. But we also see strong drivers towards automation and connectivity. And this is the change from it being a pure traditional health technologies and practice, and looking more for automation and connectivity. So the way that we'll evaluate this today in this discussion is around the data and the sources and usage of this data. So at Clarivate, we have various different data sets. The main 2 ones we'll focus on today are the curated, summarized, structured invention data. This is primarily from patents. And also peer-reviewed scientific research articles, of which we have around 200 million. The reasons why we will be looking at these are they have similar aspects. You can see in the center of the slide around the countries where they come from, the organizations, the people, whether these are authors or inventors, and they have structured data around the aspects of the technology, whether that's the scientific breakthrough in the research paper or it's the inventive step in a patent. And the quantitative metrics that we can leverage in this area are proprietary algorithms and metrics which we've developed within Clarivate, which we're going to regard as invention strength on the patent side and research impact on the research paper side. And these are from the sources Derwent World Patent Index and Web of Science that you may have familiarity with. Ultimately, these 2 data sets combined are the current state of human technical knowledge. They have directionality, so we can measure where they're going and compare them across performance comparables, but also just structured fields that allow similarity comparisons and differences across the different technical area. It also allows us to see which type of organizations are investing, producing, and ultimately citing other outputs from an ecosystem point of view, so we can understand whether it is government-funded technology institutes, whether it's universities, whether it's startups, corporations, and even whether they have international offices and are publishing or producing innovation from a different location to their headquartered location. So it gives us a lot of parameters to analyze, and we'll be focusing today on the trends in digital health, but also the interplay between these different types of organizations. So the 2 factors we'll be using in particular today are from these research papers and from the invention data. On the left-hand side, we're going to be evaluating impact via a metric that comes from our Web of Science data source, which is called Category Normalized Citation Impact, or abbreviated to CNCI. We'll sometimes refer to this as research impact. And this is a well established metric used throughout the world in research institutions. The way that this works is it looks at applying a bibliometric approach to scientific research and measuring the impact of that particular paper or article. The way it derives a numerical output is by dividing the citation count by the expected citation count rate for the papers and articles. So effectively, it's looking for, are you gaining citations faster than expected based on the age of that publication? So if something was very young and had very high citation count, that would be a higher score than if something is older with a very low citation count. This is then normalized by the type of publication or article, how long it has been published for, the actual year that it was published in case there's changes throughout time of the citation rates, and also the subject matter area, as we would see quite substantial differences between some technical areas and others related to how many citations they accrue over time. The way that we use this is then to look for what we would regard as top 10% or top 1%, to look for the outstanding papers in that area. And then we can average that and produce tables and insights into which institutions or corporations are producing the highest relevant category normalized citation impact for a particular field. And this gives us a view into impact on a quantitative scale. So this is all about measuring research impact. When we move on to the invention strength index, this is using the patent data. And to give a very brief amount of background for those that may not be as familiar with patents, this data behaves in a little bit of a different way to research in that it has to have industrial applicability. It also has a very high barrier to entry from a cost point of view, and therefore the corporations who are filing these patents will have a very clear purpose behind entering this process. It's also quite a long process, and there's various milestones where a patent can proceed or perhaps be chosen by the applicant to remove that application from the process because it might no longer be relevant or the costs might not weigh up to the expected return on investment. The way that we look at this is as we regard it at an invention level. And for those familiar with the patent system, this means that we are looking at it from a whole invention point of view, so similar to research papers, rather than an individual country by country view. This is because there's a lot of variation between the examination processes, the time, and the laws of how to get something patented in different countries. So for example, there would be a difference between Malaysia and Australia and India in how you would get something patented. The way that we actually look at the metric has some similarity to the category normalized citation impact. So we look at normalized citation impact, and this is based on geography, time, and subject matter area again to have similarity. We look at the GDP of the patent protected locations. So for example, if you had a patent granted in the US, this would gain more points in this metric than if you had a patent granted in the UK, for example, or France. We also then look at the investment level. So this is the relative investment you've had to put into this application to actually have the patent granted around the world. And then the part that is particularly interesting and unique is what we call the rarity of the technical approach, a mix described in the invention. And this is particularly relevant to the discussion today. So for example, if you had filed a patent on a biochemical feature in the healthcare space, let's say in 2000, this may be this may have had some rarity previously. However, if you were filing in the same space this year, because it is known prior art and the industry has moved on, it's likely to have a low rarity score. Whereas if you were to have a biochemical invention that had some aspects of mechanical and also linked to, let's say, a software application combining artificial intelligence, this would be a very rare multidisciplinary approach to producing an invention and therefore get a higher rarity score. And these scores do change over time based upon the relative rarity. So what we're looking for is unique, well-cited, high coverage geographical locations with high investment from the applicant, because we think that this has a statistically significant internal and external validation, and therefore is noteworthy to pick out in a similar way to the research, which has high impact, as a notable top 10% or top 1% invention. And especially in these spaces, there's a large amount of data. So being able to sift through and find ones that are high relevance to what you're looking for, or have particularly high scores across some of these factors, can allow people to prioritize and pick out hotspots of things to emulate and and also areas to look at for further investment and review. We'll now move through into looking into digital space in more detail. So what we have here is the trend line on the left-hand side of the number of inventions or papers. So this is the quantitative scale. And then the two lines that we have, so we have in yellow the invention data from the patents, and we have the green line for research papers. And this is from 2013 to 2022. And what we can see is there has been an upward trend in both areas. However, quite rapidly from 2013 through to recent available data, there's been a 70 times increase in the invention data compared to the research papers. And before going into more layers of detail into the different technical mix within this area, the assumption is because this is either the universities and or other players in the ecosystem have seen value or future value and therefore have invested heavily in the inventions in addition to the papers. What we can also see is that in the last 4 or 5 years, the research papers have rapidly increased as well, just not at the same rates or to the same magnitude of the invention areas. And this is something we'll look into later to see who's contributing to the inventions and who's contributing to the papers. Are they the same organizations? And what insight can you derive from this trend in general? On the right-hand side, we look at a normalized version of the same data. And the difference is that instead of it being purely the volume of inventions or papers, we're looking at normalization as a percentage of total activity. So what we can see here again is a similar trend from the invention data. However, we also see that the papers have been increasing their percentage of total activity. And what this means is there was an explosion of activity from the invention side, so people with more commercial interest. And then in recent times, over the past 5-6 years, there has been a second wave of research being published into scientific publications in addition to the invention data. So either the universities have started researching into the same area as where the probably corporations have been filing originally, or there could be a new wave of technology which is being applied at the research level, which is differing from that in the corporations. And that's what we'll look at in the rest of this presentation to see why this is occurring and also the underlying technologies and players within the space. So that's what we're going to investigate. So what we have on this slide is a look at the sources from a geographical point of view from the research and invention data. On the left-hand side, we're looking at the top 5 sources. So this is not an exhaustive list, it's just the highest volume of scientific papers. And we see these are coming from Canada, the United States, the UK, Germany, and Australia. The highest percentages are from the US and the UK during this time period. And we think this is probably from some of the larger universities, but we'll look and see their identities later, and follows a general trend of there being quite large institutions in these countries and also a high research output. So this is not particularly surprising from the locations, although there are obviously many other esteemed locations which are not in the top 5, but would be perhaps in 5 to 10 or be very close behind. On the right-hand side, we saw the primary sources of the inventions in the digital health space, and the only common country between these two areas is the US. So the US has 36% of the scientific papers in the top 5 and 25% of the inventions in the top 5 data sets. What we then see from an invention point of view is a hotspot in Asia as a whole continent. So we see mainland China having 52%, India 6%, South Korea 8%, and Japan 4%. So there's a very concentrated hotspot of activity in this region, and they don't appear to be the top 5 contributor of scientific papers. So what we're going to look into in the future slides is that because there's concentrated strength and they just happen to have been countries that appear to be a little bit higher than on the left-hand side from the paper producers, or is it a time delay, or are these different institutions altogether? The other part that would be quite interesting is to see how much commonality there is between the research papers and the inventions. Are they focusing on exactly the same technologies, or are the inventions focused on one subset within digital health and the research papers on another? What we also see in our recent paper is that 73% of the papers that were cited by US industrial patents are from public institutions, which is quite interesting because what this means is that there's a high degree of commercial applicability of the US research, which is not surprising if you look at 36% of the papers being from the US and 25% of the patents. The sources of these papers are actually from well-known, quite large institutions such as NIH, NSF, and other public agencies. And what this means is that the United States has had a lot of success in having publicly funded and directed and influenced research, which has translated through into inventions. It might not necessarily be exactly the same organization. So it might not be, for example, MIT or the Mayo Clinic producing the research, then citing their own paper. This can be different institutions, but it means there has been a translation from research through to commercial application. What we're looking at on the next slide, I appreciate it's quite busy, so I'll guide you through, is the key contributing entities from a research paper and a invention point of view. These are based upon who's producing the top 10% category normalized citation impact and who's producing the top 10% invention strength from our DOENT database. What we can see across these areas is there's no overlap, which is quite interesting. So they're a completely different set of organizations. So on the left-hand side, you can see the representation that we looked at previously. So you can see many different institutes that are probably quite well known to you, such as Harvard, National University of Singapore, Stanford, UCL in London, and many other Australian, European, British, American, and other location institutes that have scored highest from a research category normalized citation impact point of view. From an invention point of view, none of the same institutes are the highest invention strength producers, which means the people producing the papers are very different to the people producing the inventions. So the assumption, which we'll look at in more detail, is that they're focusing on different parts of the development cycle that we looked at earlier from an invention and a research point of view. The other aspect that is particularly interesting is considering we're looking at digital health. I think the natural assumption is that it will be only healthcare companies who are building out digital capabilities. And we do see a lot of the world's largest pharmaceutical and medtech companies. For example, I'll just highlight a few. So we've got AstraZeneca here. We've got Bristol Myers Squibb, Eli Lilly, Novartis. There's Hoffmann La Roche in here, Sanofi, and many other very large, successful medtech and pharmaceutical companies. We also have an unusual mix of software, electronics companies in here as well. So we have, for example, Alphabet, that's very well known. We have Baidu. There is Tencent present in here, and many other telecoms companies such as Nokia and Qualcomm. The next mix is more unusual as well, which is we have semiconductor companies in here, or AI-related companies. So NVIDIA, which is very well known, particularly in recent years, is also present in the data set as having some of the highest invention strength, specifically within the digital health area. And then there are other more consumer goods or health-related companies, such as Nike, present here from a sports and consumer technology point of view. So we have quite an unusual mix here. So on the left-hand side, we have very well established producers of research papers and research in general. And then on the right-hand side, we have a really unique mixture of pharmaceutical, medtech, software, conglomerates, electronics companies, consumer goods, semiconductor, telecoms, and other industries in here. What we've not looked at in detail at this high level from an overall space is whether there is individual collaboration or citation between, let's say, some of the US corporations and the US institutes. That would be done on a more granular basis. But what it means in general is that people are looking at different sections from a technology point of view and from a invention or research paper point of view. And the corporations on the right-hand side will probably have differing approaches to whether they publish research papers alone, or perhaps they do joint paper production with some of these universities on the left or other institutes around the world. So what we're going to look at next is which technologies are actually highly present within the digital health space. So on the left-hand side, we look at the mean strength of the inventions. This is looking back to that strength index that we discussed earlier on in the presentation. And then we look at the mean age. So in the top right, there is the highest strength, most recent invention filings, whereas in the bottom left, there is the lowest strength and oldest technology. And what stands out highlighted in yellow is that AI advanced analytics are top right, and the size of the bubbles is related to the volume of inventions. So you can see that AI in recent times, in the last 10 years, has been one of the largest areas from a volumetric point of view. It is also very high strength and very recent, which tracks to some of the trends that we saw earlier, but we can look into whether this is a driving component. We also see that gaming and software as a medical device are key areas within the digital health space, amongst other areas which have, for example, it may be they are growing older without strength, or it could be they are more recent but have not gained strength and impact yet. So, for example, mobile health app, I think will not be a surprise to many people today, is a slightly older technology. So this is because it's more to the left rather than the right, like AI, and it has lower strength compared to the 4 factors within our strength index that we discussed earlier. Whereas, for example, sensors here is slightly older than AI in the space on average, however, actually has higher strength in general. And this is likely to be because of the age of the technology, and also it may be that the sensors are being applied from other industries. And this is something to be considered when we look at all these different technical areas. Some aspects, for example, telemedicine, will likely be highly centered in the health space because of the unique nature of the technical area, whereas wearable devices, connected devices, sensors, and AI are fundamental technologies which could be applied to completely different areas. So, for example, to transport or to security or telecommunications, those technologies could be re-engineered for a different purpose using similar concepts. On the right-hand side, we actually look at similar data, but from a different point of view. So what these are growth multipliers. So we have down here the growth multiplier inventions only. And then on the left-hand side, we have the growth multiplier papers and articles. And what we see is that from a growth point of view, AI is sitting at around 50 times the inventions and around 80 times the research papers and articles. So not only is it age, strength, and volume far higher on the left-hand chart than the other technical areas, but from a growth multiplier point of view, it is 50 to 80 times whether you look at inventions or the combined research output growth in the last 10 years. So this is an extremely high growth rate, which I don't think will be hugely surprising to the audience today. However, I think the difference between the other technical areas and the utilization of AI in the digital health space is quite notable. And this is what we're going to look at further, of who's driving this and where are they based. The other conclusion, which one of the members in our team came to, is when you look at the application of data into all industries, 5-10 years ago, it was considered as big data, whereas now it's basically just referred to as data. And we're thinking that the same thing will apply in the digital health space, which is that all health tech will be assumed to have a digital element moving forwards and therefore just be referred to as healthcare. This is what Ed White in the Clarivate team spoke about and predicted in Stanford earlier in the year. So moving forward, we're going to look at who's actually contributing, particularly to the AI space applied specifically to digital health. So on the right-hand side, we have the top portfolios. This is volumetrically based upon the parent who is filing these. We've picked out a few highlights. So last time we looked at the overall digital health space and the mix of contributors. We have a lot of the pharmaceutical and medtech companies in here. So we have Johnson & Johnson, Roche, Philips, Medtronic, and General Electric. So these are present as some of the largest filers. We also have the conglomerates, the electronics companies and software companies such as Alphabet, Baidu, IBM, Samsung, Siemens, and Tencent. And then we also have quite a few universities and public research institutes. So I've picked out a few from here, but there are quite a lot more on the right-hand side. So, for example, Chinese Academies of Sciences is coming in 4th from a contribution point of view, and then also Seoul University from South Korea, and Zhejiang University from China. And there are many more on the right-hand side. So this starts to show the contributions into particularly AI within the digital health space. So there is a mix of corporations and from public research institutes and universities from a pure volumetric point of view. And this is focused heavily on inventions on this chart. What we're going to look at next, though, is how does the academic and corporation communities contribute and where do they play within a few different technical areas, including AI within the digital health space, because we want to look at and dissect that trend line that we saw earlier for the overall space. So on the left-hand side, we have the trend line for sensors, particularly within the digital health space. And what we can see is that it grew rapidly between 2011 and 2015. It then plateaued from a volumetric point of view for a year, and then actually decreased from a volumetric point of view for a few years by around 20%. On the right-hand side, we see one of our commercial dynamics charts. So we have Derwent strength, so invention strength on the left-hand side, and underneath we have the average age, again, similar to the technical mix that we looked at earlier. In the top right-hand side, we see the emerging players. So these are ones with very high strength and recent activity. And these are, as you can see, represented by quite a few large corporations. So we have Qualcomm and Roche in here, Samsung, Casio, Apple, Huawei, J&J, for example. But we also have University of California in here, which shows there is a research presence in the emerging players. There will be a mix of corporations and universities throughout the other segments, so based on whether there is older or lower strength activity. But in general, this area has matured, then it has plateaued and then decreased a little bit, and we see a large proportion of corporations with quite large filing activity in this space. If we look at telemedicine next, and we actually focus on the small notable players, so these are less than 50 inventions in this space, so that it will be smaller volumes than we saw on the previous one. And we focus on the trend line in general. We can see in telemedicine, there was a rapid growth in 2012 through to 2015. It then plateaued for a little while and then increased a bit further. So this may still be developing, but seems to have more or less slowed down in the volumetric growth point of view. We see that the smaller portfolios with high strength are again quite largely represented by corporations with a few universities or institutes in there. So we have Walgreen Boots, which plays mainly in the US, European markets, but we also have Intel, Huawei, HP, Sony, and many other corporations. So in the small players in telemedicine, there is high proportion corporate representation. When we move through into the AI space, the trend line is quite different to the last two, so sensors and telemedicine. So it is rapidly increasing, and it doesn't appear to have slowed down at all in recent years where we have data available. When we look at the emerging players, the ones with high strength and with very recent filings, you can see universities heavily represent this space. And one of the only corporations in this area is Ping An Insurance Group, although a very large company representing a large portion of these filings. And what this means is when we looked at the data from a high level point of view, we saw that the research papers were increasing in recent years, whereas the inventions were more or less in this kind of trajectory in digital health overall. What we start to uncover by looking at the AI recent strong inventions is that the increase in the research papers may also be coming from these universities, but they are also filing the inventions themselves. So they're applying fundamental research from a research paper point of view, and then also protecting and investing in intellectual property via the patent system in more commercially applied research. So this is quite interesting because of the absence of corporations in the digital health space from a strength and recency point of view. The corporations will be, as we saw in the previous chart, perhaps either lower strength or older technology, whereas the very new and very strong index-based inventions are heavily from universities and heavily from Chinese universities. So overall, when we compare these three areas, we see quite a different representation of organizations owning different ecosystem from a strength and recency point of view. We can see that sensors has declined in its trend. We can see that telemedicine has more or less plateaued and increased a tiny bit recently, and AI is still growing. And the more that a technology area has plateaued or even matured and started to decline, the heavier corporate representation in these top strong recent players. So with sensors, it's 11 corporations to one academic institution in the top right quadrant. In the smaller portfolios, which we regard as notable entrants, it's 7 to 3. So again, very represented from the corporation point of view. In telemedicine, where it seems to be medium maturity compared to sensors, it is a lot more academic focused, and only in the smaller, more recent players from an invention point of view is the corporations. And in AI, it's only one corporation to 17 academic institutions, whereas looking at the smaller players, it does have some corporations in there who are looking to follow what the universities have been protecting from a patent point of view. So this starts to give a view of how can universities actually commercialize their research from the earlier fundamental research that they've been investing in, and how corporations may follow or actually want to partner with universities to develop this technology further. Recently, a few months ago, our CEO at Clarivate, myself and a few of the team members visited CNRS, a large French public research institution. And what we looked at and listened to were some talks from some of their recent spin-outs. And these scientists were both authors and inventors. And some of the decisions that they were looking at was whether they should commercialize the research or should they continue in the fundamental research, and how to actually turn this scientific breakthrough into a product that would be commercially successful. And it's not as simple as you file a invention on the same research paper area. There is a lot more testing and processing and market feedback that's required. And we saw that this actually can produce more innovation in itself. So it could be feedback loops, it could be how does the competition behave, it could be how do local markets require different features, different value propositions, or different inventions themselves to be combined with past research. And what's quite interesting is this could actually drive a space such as healthcare to being more digital in nature. So if you think about mobile phone apps, even for example, during the COVID-19 pandemic, the way that you could use software and hardware to allow people to get treatment and access to healthcare could be one of these spaces where applying it into the real world application means it goes from being a biochemical invention to suddenly being digital and electronic in nature. So the movement from medtech and pharmaceutical more into digital health is quite interesting when you are spinning out and applying the science into the real world applications. When we look at the impacts of university research in particular, I focused on devices and hardware because this is a more electronics-based section within the digital health space. We can see that across all the areas, actually, we have US leading from a volumetric point of view. In this space in particular, you can see that South Korea has some higher metrics than the US. So from a volumetric point of view, the US, then China, then UK had the most documents cited by patents. So this is the most research papers that were cited by patents as prior art, which means they want to build upon them and perhaps apply the science into a commercial application. And then we have the overall percentage cited by patents, and then the average. And this is where South Korea scored particularly highly. These citations are quite interesting in invention data and are slightly different to in research papers, in that when you file a patent application to an individual economy or patent office, each applicant can cite who they like. So MIT could reference iTree in Taiwan, or could reference University College London in the UK. That's their choice. But the examiner citation is where they decide what's novel and inventive. And these are regarded very strongly as key indications of relevance and proximity. So what we're looking at here is the proximity of fundamental research in these countries of origin of research institutes or corporations filing research papers, and when they're cited by a patent as being highly similar. So these are really quite strong indicators of similarity. The other area that we could look at from an impact point of view, which we've not looked at in this study, but have produced papers on more recently, is actually things such as the sustainability goals, so the SDGs from the UN, and particularly in the digital health or environmental areas, things like access to water, sanitation, clean energy, sustainable cities, climate change, life beyond water and life on land are particularly relevant SDG goals that could be applied to research areas such as digital health to understand whether these are actually improving and developing society further according to these goals. And what we're really looking for is powerful indicators that can allow organizations, nations, and research institutes to produce societal use and influence. So the commercial application can be captured by patent data, but there are various other metrics that can be used to understand the impact or potentially the return on investments of fundamental research. In the last few slides, we're going to look at how we can actually use some of these metrics to investigate and understand how to apply policy from a technical point of view across multidisciplinary areas. So what I'll look at briefly here is what we're calling predicting invention growth related to S-curves. So on the left-hand side, we have a curve that may look similar to a hype curve that you see in the media. And on the left-hand side, we have volumetric quantification. So for example, this could be patents, it could be research papers, it could be sales of a product. And underneath we have time. So what we see is that when a field is quite immature, so we're looking down here, there is potentially low interest or a high barrier to entry, and it's quite hard to produce the research, file the inventions, or sell the product, for example. However, once this starts to pick up, it will normally move into fast growth and then develop quite quickly. And a good example of this that we've discussed today is the artificial intelligence area. So this is growing maturity from a research paper, from a patenting point of view, and even from an application point of view at a very fast rate. However, it can't continue in its exact form forever. It can't continue to accelerate indefinitely. And this will need to slow once the maturity increases. And that's when it will start to plateau eventually. So what we look at here and quantify is the level of development in certain technologies. And for example, the space that is digital health is a really good example in that the biopharmaceutical therapies for certain diseases and conditions, they may mature in their particular state, and then they may move on and a different curve starts. And the application of digital technologies to this area is likely to be a much lower maturity and much faster growth rate, as we've seen throughout the data today. So what we can do from a whole industry or technology point of view is start to map on a national scale the percentage focus of invention filings versus the predicted growth. And the way that we predict the growth is to extrapolate the current filing patterns. So if you look at the recent past and you see what the trajectory is, for example, is it down here or is it more about to slow down and plateau? We can start to see, is there alignment to the predicted invention growth? So this is a quite simple measure in that we're looking at, is there alignment? So if a nation or an organization has been heavily focusing their investment and their output on high growth areas, there would be alignment. If they have been investing heavily into areas that are predicted to have low growth, this doesn't necessarily mean it's the wrong decision, but it could be that they're protecting or further investing in an area which is very important to them or has been producing revenue streams or requires further investment. So it could be an over-focus in a low growth area, but it would require further investigation. The reverse is under-focus. And this is what a lot of companies are coming to us and asking about, which is, are they potentially missing the next trend, the next area that is predicted high growth, but they perhaps don't have the research capacity or the inventor community or ecosystem development to produce the next high growth, for example, deep tech company, or the next wave of innovation into the health space, whether that's digital or of other nature. So if we look at focus versus predicted growth, this can be a good measure to start to build up data for a national strategy. The next area is to look at how does this compare from a strength locally and abroad. So we call this a SWOT analysis from a invention point of view. So we would have national innovation strength on the left-hand side and innovation strength of others along the bottom. And what this would produce is where, for example, let's say the UK has strength and others don't, this would be a strength for the nation. Where there is strength from the UK and other nations, this could be a threat in that there could be a very high degree of competition. Opportunity would be low strength of both, and a weakness could be the reverse of a strength in that it could be low strength from a nation or a corporation and high strength from others. And depending upon how these interplay or the connection between certain technologies, this is really important to understand where to focus your spend and your policy, for example. But the interplay between the technologies that could be in such analysis is really important, because it could be that you have a very high strength in healthcare, but a weakness in digital and AI technologies. And then there's different ways to catch up or invest in different areas that could help you understand these further. The other model that we would apply to looking at such a national strategy and understanding where to invest is what we call a technology maturity index. When we combine here various different metrics, so we have commercialization modes, so the level of commercialized research into inventions, the predict invention levels, as we looked at earlier, the S-curve completion, so at what point in the curve is it? How much are the inventions in this area owned by large corporations, and the level of IP assertion. And this is looking at litigation and also what's called oppositions in the intellectual property area, where people may point out issues or object to the granting and protection of certain technologies. And what this results in is, this is an electric vehicle space example, is on the bottom left-hand side, we have fuel supply being a very mature area that is decreasing across all these different metrics. What we have in the bottom right are areas that are far more immature and the most immature in this space. So this is charging and renewable energy charging. This is from a paper a couple of years ago. And then in the middle, we have various different technologies with different mixes of corporate ownership, S-curve completion, predicted invention levels, and levels of IP assertion. And when you're looking at this from a research corporation or policy point of view, it means that you should look very carefully at the areas that are very mature to consider if you want to further invest in them, and make sure you have a mixture of investments across the immature areas, the mostly immature, trending mature, and very mature areas, to make sure that you're not investing in older technology that may not suit your ecosystem or where the markets are going in general. So this is really important to understand. In the previous charts on the prior slides, where the industry is going, where you've been focused. The left-hand side is to look at your strengths versus international strengths. And then the technology maturity is to see where the industry is going in general from a more granular technology point of view. So ultimately, the way that you would come to a decision looking at these strengths is to look at also, where is the fundamental research in your nation comparing to your innovation strength? And this may be that you have extremely high strength in particular fundamental technologies, but are looking at how can you apply this from a more commercialized point of view. And so what we would want to do is look at the national strengths, the innovation strength, the predicted invention level growth, the focus and technology maturity, and then understand which prioritized mix of technologies would you want to evaluate for further investment. And investment is not the only way to actually understand this. So what you would want to do is actually look at whether it is local academic corporate partnerships, whether it's, for example, IP licensing, whether there are research capacity bottlenecks or capabilities, and, for example, the societal impact of these researchers as well, because the production of patents is not the only success criteria from research in an area such as digital space or other areas. So we feel that by looking at these different parameters, it would provide a robust matrix and decision-making criteria of how to apply policy and also investment and strategy. The other aspects that we mentioned already is things such as the UN SDG mapping, which is really important. And then the other part to think about is the last few slides that we've looked at would be a very introspective point of view, which is what would suit a particular nation. So where is their strength? Where is there alignments between where the industry is going? And what suits the particular nation from a maturity point of view and what they would want to prioritize. And from a research paper point of view, that would be highly aligned. From a patent point of view, it becomes a lot more commercial and country by country in nature. So, for example, when we've been looking at invention strength, it is the invention across all the countries where it's protected. Whereas when you look at the inventions in more detail, because they are jurisdictional in nature, you start to look at things that are even outside of research and intellectual property from a pure point of view, such as tax or incentives or competitiveness of a market. And that's where attracting international companies, talent, researchers becomes far more fluid and competitive. So it could be that one nation would set a technical strategy which has embedded in it collaboration with a neighboring neighboring country which has complementary strengths and weaknesses, and therefore they collaborate across different areas so that they don't individually need to be successful in all areas. So this is something to think about when you're considering ecosystem development and how, for example, digital health could develop in the UK, the US, or Malaysia, or mainland China, for example, in that it's unlikely that one nation or organization would have strength across an entire multidisciplinary area such as digital health. And it's a very country by country aspect. So to build and nurture such an economy, we think that having a strategy which looks at the research, it looks at the invention outputs, but also the different players in the market and how you cooperate internationally is really key for cross-fertilization. And this makes a lot of sense when you think about competition and survival of the fittest in general, which is that the policy and investment and decisions that a organization or a nation can make can actually provide a very fruitful and fertile area where organizations can grow and produce high quality research in the universities and research institutes. They can spin out startups, there can be collaboration and incubators with large corporations. And this can be from local headquartered organizations, but also from abroad. So we think this is really important. So in conclusion, I think what we looked at today from a digital health point of view is there is a large diversity of players in this space and technologies being protected. There is very little overlap actually between the high strength producers of research papers and the high strength producers of inventions. There is a mismatch in geographies in here from a top player's point of view, which means it will be very interesting to see which parts of the digital health space are in the future protected and led by different economies. And there is potentially a new development phase due to the addition of digital and hardware technologies into the health space, due to AI being an enabler that is not only specific to healthcare, but is being applied into all industries globally. The research impact from public and university research is very high. It's also translating through, especially in the US, into commercial invention production. And it's being really well directed and has quite a high success rate from institutions and funding agencies such as NIH. And by looking at these sorts of models, metrics, and understanding the ecosystem, we think that they can be leveraged for prioritizing investments, deciding on policy, and really boosting innovation ecosystems such as digital healthcare. So the final thing we'll look at just as a kind of recap is the other kind of questions we're receiving in our team at the moment from a problem statement point of view are some of these, which some of them are quite specific to research institutes, such as central research areas are how is the production of research and innovation differing from more focused areas. We get questions that are very jurisdictional in nature, so looking at Chinese or other nations' competitors and how they're entering markets. And ones that are very specific. So for example, we've done a lot of work in the water industry, oil and gas industry about partnerships, acquisition decisions, and how can organizations leverage their strengths and find strengths of others to complement where they would want to work. And many of these are cross-functional in nature from a technology point of view, but also from research through to innovation. And I think that's the kind of final point to really consider, which is in the healthcare space in particular, but also more generally, we did some research recently that really looked at the average number of inventors per invention. And back in 2003, it seemed to be around just above 3 inventors per invention. It's now around 4, which may not sound as a substantial increase to many of the audience, but this is a 33% increase in around 20 years. And what we see is that the research output and inventions in general is not decreasing, but the amount of inventors is significantly increasing. And we think this is likely because, exactly as we've seen today in the digital health space, the application of new technologies or the converging spaces of especially electronics, software and hardware into pretty much every space. If we think back to the automation and connectivity drivers in all industries, they are driving more cross-functional research, such as having a software engineer sitting with a biochemist to produce something very novel and rare. And that's the type of questions and analysis that we think are are notable and also relevant to leading the next wave of innovation in any industry. But thank you very much for your time today, and hopefully that's stimulated lots of questions from yourselves, and we'd be happy to answer questions at the end, or feel free to reach out to us another time. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Philip, for sharing the insights on how to utilize research and innovation data. So, insight on the IT trends used in the digital health, some of the key innovators, as well as the technology maturity framework on the EV ecosystem, and the mapping of the research trend to the national strategy. Next. She has more than 25 years of leadership experience in field of strategy, IP management, patent strategy, technology transfer, licensing and commercialization, IP valuation and pricing, advanced managerial techniques, which comprise of market validation analysis, technology validation analysis, patent strategy, technology freedom to operate analysis, R&D strategy planning, and R&D investment assessment, and R&D roadmap advisory. She is currently the head of a research planning and coordination department, oversee advocacy on R&D strategy planning, market and technology validation for development of R&D roadmap and investment. With this, I shall invite Puan Azima Abdul Kadir to present her topic on impact of AI on industry value chain in Malaysia. Thank you. I hand over.
Thank you, Simon. Assalamualaikum and very good afternoon, everyone. All the attendees, in-person attendees here in MIMOS, and also very good afternoon to all our friends who are attending through the webinar today. Okay, this is the first session that we have, we organize the talk together in hybrid format. And today I'm going to present on the topic that you can see currently on the screen, which is impact of AI on industry value chain in Malaysia. Now, why we choose this topic is because of the booming activities related to AI. And also, coincidentally, WIPO have launched their landscape on Gen AI, which I will cover in this topic as well. Right. Okay, our discussion today is just informational and also for intellectual discussion, right? Okay. My presentation will cover these 5 subtopics. I will touch a little bit on the methodology that we use in our analysis, and I will touch on understand Gen AI technology, and we will look at impact on industry value chain in Malaysia, and then we will visit on impact on governance and talents in Malaysia, as well as impact on decision making for research and investment. All right. First, on the methodology. Now, our approach in analyzing AI technology and impact is looking from the market-driven or market-based perspective, because we are looking at how do we verify and use whatever data there is to validate, to see whether how the value chain is going to look like, how the industry is going to behave, or how industry is going to accept or adapt or even adopt this new technology, right? And we also look at the perspective of ROI and ROV. We look at the 4 angles of the Malaysia SDI approach, where we will look into the research development, commercialization, and innovation aspects of investment. And then we will look at and evaluate or assess the IP strategy and business strategy by conducting the what we call a freedom to operate analysis and to look at the potential opportunity to sustain. Right. Now, the types of data that we use in our analysis comprises of these four data. Number one, we look at patent that represents the new technology that have been granted with the economic rights to exploit and use. And why we use this data? Because patent data represents the regulated or have a regulated economic impact. It empowers the patent owners to explore and exploit the patents commercially, and it has been given a 20 years period to do so. And secondly, we look at scientific literature, whereby all our researchers in MIMOS will conduct this literature review respectively, right? And because this data represents the knowledge and know-how, and for enrichment impact, right, the growth in know-how, skill, and self-sustaining capabilities, and we're looking at long-term impact on nation capability and capacity. And thirdly, we are using the market data that represents the market demand and size, opportunities, as well as risks, right? Now, impact, the market data will tell us the impact on investment decision making. It will measure opportunities, short-term to mid-term, impact based on demand size as well as continuity. Now, fourthly, we will study we uses the industry value chain data that represents the actual technology application and business positioning in the ecosystem, the characteristics and its value proposition. Now, value chain data are facts because those reflects the actual economic situation of each industry, right? That's how each industry operates. So those are facts that we cannot deny, right? So that is why we use all this for data, types of data in our analysis. Right. Now, next, let's try and understand about Gen AI technology. There's so many commotion about Gen AI or AI. There's a lot of perspectives to it that we have read in the news, or we even listens to news and so forth, right? So, but what is it actually, and how does it look like? Right. Now, do you know, this is something that I find that very interesting when I read the WIPO report recently. Do you know that Gen AI such as ChatGPT had 1 million users within just 5 days? Within 5 days. Versus Netflix users reach 1 million in 3.5 years. Now, allowing, isn't it? Right. Okay. Now, do you know there is a semantic difference between when you mention an image generated by AI versus AI was used in the image generation process? Are these two sentences similar? No, as a engineer, technical field of background, when you think about it, you know, there are difference in that context, isn't it? So that is something that we need to consider and we need to learn and understand. Okay. Now, the chronology of AI, as we know, it has started quite some time ago, but then it had cooled down a little bit, what they call as the AI winter in 1970s, and it was suddenly brought up because it became surface because of the what they dub as the transformer AI patent by Google, right? So this is something that we know that we have learned, that we have listened to or read in the news, in the research papers about the emergence of the neural network, right? So because of that, then there was a boom of ChatGPT, LLM, and so forth, right? And now we are looking at more has surfaced, but do we know how it looked like? what it is, right? So why I highlighted all those is because I would like to share with you the Gen AI patent landscape that was announced and launched by WIPO on 3rd of July. Now, this report has enabled us to understand from the technology perspective what was actually or how actually AI looks like, in what form, in what capability and capacity, right? So if you look here, uh, which I have actually quoted from this report, Gen AI is booming. It is a cutting edge technology that is poised to disrupt various economic, social, cultural sectors, and it extends far beyond simple human-like text generation using chatbots. So what this report is saying that AI is not just your LLM, it's not your chat box, it's beyond that, right? And it has been depicted by WIPO as a disruptive technology. Yeah. And if you Google up the word disruptive technology, you ask our friend ChatGPT, they will give you a very thorough description of disruptive technology. Right? But do you know how to deal with disruptive technology? As you can see here, WIPO mentioned that the impact first is going to disrupt the economic. It didn't say it's going to disrupt the technology. It says it's going to disrupt economic, social, and cultural sectors. Okay? Now, and as of in 2023, there are 14,000 Gen AI patent that was published alone in 2023, compared to 733 patents published in 2014. Okay. Now, so if you look at the next chart, which I also referred to the same report, right? You can see that the Gen AI patent has increased by over 800% over 10 years, right? And scientific publication has increased just to 34,000 in 2023 compared to 116 in 2014, right? So this is interesting because now we managed to see the actual activity or data that relates to Gen AI. Right. Now, who are the players? Now, again, based on this data, WIPO have managed to categorize the biggest number of patents being filed on Gen AI by Tencent Holdings, China. So this diagram tells us who is leading in terms of the Gen AI patent, right? But what I would like to draw your attention is to look at the names of these top technology players: Tencent, Ping An, Baidu, IBM, Alphabet, Microsoft. They are not technology player. They are main market player. And if you look at the description where WIPO have also provided in the report, Tencent have actually implemented the Gen AI with respect to the user experience improvement and use it in their product WeChat. So it's not something that they cook in their lab, but they have actually implemented it in their product. The same goes with all the other marketplace. So what this data tell us is that all this progress in terms of Gen AI patent is driven by market player for their market. Yeah, it's not a scientific research. It is for the use of revenue generation by the market player. So I'm sharing here an experiment that we have conducted here in MIMOS. We have actually been following through the progress of AI since 2021. Right? We have monitored the activities in the market as well as the activities in the patents realm, right? And we have generated this chart to look at who are currently leading or who are actually creating a lot of activity in terms of technology in AI. And at this point of time, this is prior to the WIPO report. At this point of time, we only use keywords such as artificial intelligence. And this is the type of chart that we have retrieved, right? Now, what I would like to share next is an experiment that we did upon the announcement of the Gen AI report by WIPO. We have used the additional or the more on-point keywords that WIPO have established based on the data that they have analyzed. We have added the keywords such as modes and models in our search and look at the data that we have retrieved. The data showed that, again, which is consistently with whatever that has been found by WIPO in their report, that the leaders are market players from various industries. Now, so according to WIPO, this is how Gen AI is being categorized, right? So you have Gen AI models, modes, and application, right? Now, what I would like to draw your attention to is the diffusion models that has one of the highest numbers, which I will show you later, right? That have increased tremendously in 2023, right? Now, let's look at the next slide, where you will see that in 2023, diffusion model patents have surpassed 180% of the total filing. Now, what does diffusion models means? Right? Diffusion models actually is looking at the application of the Gen AI approach. Right? So what we have done is we next look at what are the um, market segment with respect to AI, right? So we look at the first wave of AI and from 2018 to 2023. And at this point of time, this article showed us that the first wave is concentrating on predictive model, right? And then 2022 onwards, in 2022, the second wave looks at generative model, right? This is where we started to see the chat GPT comes in. There are more models for different types of data. We have text, images, videos, codes, or protein, right? And we also look at the progress where chat GPT now have already reached to chat GPT 3 and currently now it's already chat GPT 4, right? Now, but the next wave would be the physical aspect of the codes. This is where we're looking at the diffusion model. The diffusion model relates to application of the codes into various applications. So we need to understand what does it mean? What kind of application? How is it being adopted? So we have all these questions, right? So we investigate further and we look at the megatrends report. That, for example, there are many megatrends report. One of it is the one that is being announced by Gartner on their ICT megatrend. So we look at what are the trends that has been highlighted by Gartner that relates to AI or Gen AI. So what we've done is we label it in the red bubble. We created a pointer to show that where actually Gen AI is present in the forecasted mega trends on ICT for 2024 by Gartner. Right. But then we are able to also look at the trend is falling into these four themes where Gartner says that the trend is leading towards smart world, productivity revolution, privacy and transparency, and critical enablers. But still, this does not help us to understand how does it have an impact to the market or the economy, right? So we need to understand the impact that or the maturity of the technology with the impact to the market. So again, in Gartner, they have categorized the impact from 1 to 2 years, 1 to 3 years, 3 to 6 years, and 6 to 8 years. Right? So we map our rate bubble, right, to see where that the predicted market that by Gartner falls into. So you can see that as of now, anything that have that is incorporating AI element falls into 1 to 3 years to 3 to 6 years, right? So that is the potential um, outlook for AI in the market. But still, it doesn't answer our question. Which market segment or which market segment that have the potential to drive some potential opportunities in the economy? So that made us find out further with respect to the value chain of the AI ecosystem market player. We need to understand I mean, by looking at the technology data alone is not sufficient. We need to we need to understand how the technology behave or how they actually operate in the market. So we need to understand. We look at this value chain on the hardware, and we look at which are the um, segment. For example, we have the component compute layer, we have the foundational model layer and application layer for different types of data. So we look at who are the players, who are the current market players in this value chain segment, right? Then we investigate further. We want to know how far this AI ecosystem can evolve, right? So we pull out a bigger multiple value chain, right, infrastructure to understand, right, how it look like. And we are able to see that the models and algorithms, right, and the solution, the enterprise solution, these are actually the infrastructure that AI is actually um, supporting, right? Supporting the vertical application for various industries value chain. So you're looking at, for example, you have healthcare, you have finance, you have telco, you have agriculture, automotive, legal and compliance, you have industrials as well as other retail value chain, right? So at the end of it, at the bottom of this value chain, we notice that there is one activity here or layer on the hardware, which is the chip, right? And we are able to see that these are the players. Now, AI requires some element of AI have impact on various element in the technology, correct? So one of it is the chip, right? To enable the functional aspect of the AI processing and whatnot. So you require a new chip that have that capability. So from this multiple business model infrastructure, we're able to see how AI is actually addressing or is actually being adopted or adapted, right? So this is something that tells us like, okay, now this would give us a good idea. If we want to introduce something, now we need to know which vertical that we are addressing and what that we need to do, what we need to create, right? To enable us to enter into those industry vertical areas. But again, do we know what is the innovative idea that we are supposed to create? That still doesn't answer that question, isn't it? Okay. So what we have done is we have done an analysis. We have done an analysis. We're looking at the technology focus area on AI adoption. So we have seen that okay, they are comprises of machine learning, NLP, and so forth, right? But what we have done next is we look at is there we study whether there are diverse application and ongoing advancement within this field of AI. So these are the areas that we have found, right? And these are the trends that we have identified from 2015 to 2024. So these are all the analysis that we have generated based on the patent data that and the tools that we have been using, right? So to provide us a better understanding, we have zoomed in to look at the portfolio of the total technology. How does it look like when they are being linked together through the patent data? Because there are connectivity with respect to the citations information in the patent data, and we are able to understand how this information or the technology are being packaged, right? And these are the same analysis that we have further represent in a different form to give us a better understanding, right? And one of these is the looking at the cybersecurity and threat detection. So here we are looking at the number of patents that relates to cybersecurity and threat detection, and we're looking at the highest number of focus area is in the network security techniques. These are the list of the focus area by year, right? And what we have done is we look at the potential risk for us to enter or anyone to enter into this area. We look at the potential opportunity. For example, we look at uh, the the red zone is a high number of data with different numbers of players, right? And we also identified new areas that emerge, right, which is standalone, and we find that maybe we need to investigate further how the new area works, right? Right. So now when we have studied we have understand the technology. Now we want to look at how does it impact on the Malaysia industry value chain. So they are globally, these are the potential opportunity for enterprise with respect to the adoption of AI, right? So they are looking at commercial and technical. So this report or this finding help us to understand globally, everyone have agreed in somehow that these are the potential applications of AI and which have demand from the respective players, right? And these are further defined, for example, through by looking at different vertical. For example, manufacturing, what are the pain points, what are the use cases for healthcare, logistics, telco, and so forth, right? And there was a report that was published earlier that the regions that will benefit most from AI will be the Middle East, right? Right. But in Malaysia, How does it look like? Right? AI is still, to us, we are the baby, not AI. AI is not the baby. We Malaysians, we are the research fraternity. We are the baby. We are still crawling. We are still learning. We want to understand AI, right? But we also need to know, how does the industry look like in Malaysia that has started to adopt AI, right? So one of our finding that is quite interesting is that the fintech industry in Malaysia. Now, the gaps in AI have give an opportunity to blockchain to come in to overcome issues related to threats and security. So we look at this value chain for fintech in Malaysia, and we found out that there is one item here on AI or data, and there are players there in that area that actually uses AI in their industry, right? Now, these are what we have found out when we asked our friend ChatGPT. And the answers that ChatGPT gave us is the potential area for AI in fintech will be looking at risk assessment and fraud detection, customer services and chatbots, credit scoring and underwriting, and algorithm trading, personalized financial advice. But the sixth item which caught my attention is the robo advisor. It's interesting, but this is what our friend ChatGPT told us. Right? So another impact that I would like to highlight is the impact on governance and talents in Malaysia. Now, this is, I think, would be the primary issues that need to be addressed. Right? As I mentioned, we are all still baby in this technology. So do we know how it look like in terms of the governance now? This report by EY deliberated on the impact of Gen AI on enterprise. Why I highlighted that the issue on enterprise is here in my finding is because the main user of AI is going to be the enterprise, right? So EY or Ernst & Young have deliberated these issues, right? Looking at how the the issues related to governance needs to be addressed, and how it's going to, what are the approach to manage the threat or the challenges that the adoption of AI being from the enterprise perspective. Now, this report also share about the policies that have been introduced worldwide in the in the Europe, in the Western countries, right? These are all the governance that have been introduced. And even in the APAC region, also most countries have started to introduce policies as well as control measures. Right? Now, so the Gen AI solution adoption here is by looking at how do you expand the control attributes that each organization is supposed to consider, right? In the event that they adopt AI solutions, right? And this is also the governance framework that has been recommended by EY, right? Now, the next impact is on AI skill and talents, all right? This is a study by AWS. Now, what I observe is that based on the data that we have seen, the patent data, the patent investment has been pioneered by the market players. The same goes with the investment in terms of skill development, right? What you can see here, AWS have actually conducted a study, a survey, right? And they have found out that 44% of Asia Pacific employers are willing to pay 44% more salary to those talents that have AI skill, right? And so forth, right? So this is a real awakening information, right? But do we know I'll have to skip this. Okay, what are the scope of skill or knowledge that the employers are looking for, right? Now, this is also finding from the survey, right? Whereby they said that out of 4 candidates that they interviewed, right, 3 of the candidates do not have any AI skill, right? Now, Stanford also have identified these are the 6 AI skills that is required, right? NLP, visual image recognition, robotics, machine learning, neural network for deep learning, as well as data. I see you're smiling. Oh, that's good. Good news, I hope. Okay. And the OECD word cloud also did pull out data from all the job vacancies that have been posted, and they found out that these are the main skill that is being looked for by the job poster. Right? Now, another study that we would like to share here, these are the 2 reports that we have found. One is a report by Ireland, the National AI Strategy in 2021, right? And the most recent one is by ARISA, which is a project funded by EU. Okay. What is interesting is that ARISA was conducted in Europe. Okay. And the report shows that there is a growing offer of education, right? However, this offer of education studies in AI does not meet the demand of the market. Yeah. So this report also analyzed and identified what are the AI skill that is required. Right. For example, here they're looking at for the AI general skill, right, from business to business, data analytics, as well as artificial intelligence is high in demand. Right. And then they're looking at for big data and data analytics. Right. They're looking at data analytics, artificial intelligence, and business to business. And for findings from job vacancies here, also they're looking at machine learning and deep learning. So these are the information or the skill that they are looking at: machine learning, artificial intelligence with business to business, AI technology, and data analytics. So this combination of skill or know-how is what that the survey have identified, right? And this is related to cybersecurity, and this is related to LLM. These are the types of skill that is required, right? And for data scientists and data engineers, these are the types of skill that additionally is required for AI. Right. Now, in Malaysia, there has been a lot of initiative and training that has been actually developed or being rolled out, but these are also pioneered by the market players. Now, so that is the impact on talent. Now, next, the impact on decision making for research and investment. Now, we have actually consolidated our findings with respect to the chronology and all the market data, and we put it in this roadmap, right? Where it shows the hybrid of AI areas, right? Where starting from the pre-deep learning era to the deep learning large scale era, and then deep learning era here 2010 to 2020. But we are looking at what is beyond 2023. Right, so for beyond 2023, we have identified that there's a high demand in or potential in the software for AI, under healthcare, manufacturing, security, agriculture, and also in semiconductors. So these are each of these areas we have identified as listed on the slide. Okay, but we went and verify again. We verify again to see whether who are actually the top 20 technology players focusing on AI, diffusion model, and training model. Right? Initially, we verified only on modes and model. Now we wanted to find on diffusion model who are actually playing in the diffusion model space. Right? So these are the companies. Right? To understand further, we did a deep dive investigation on um, the portfolio of the technology. For example, we experimented on Tencent's data, right? We look at, for example, the generation model patents that Tencent have been filing or being has been published, right? What are the list of focus area of the patent? Right? So it's been listed here under generation model, diffusion model, and reconstruction model. Now, this combination of information help us to understand further how it's being developed and how the technology is being, the process of developing this technology or these respective technology areas, right? Through the patent data. Right. And we develop one high-level helicopter view of the patent data that has been filed or published from 2021 to 2024, right? To identify where are the potential risk area, which is highlighted in the red zone, right? And where are the potential emerging area, which or opportunity that has been highlighted in the yellow zone. So this would give us some guidance as how do we maneuver, how do we navigate, right, to identify where would be the potential area for our research moving forward. But knowing that is not enough. So another guide for us is to look at where are the areas that has received funding. Right? Now, this is a commercial data, right, of AI activities that has or is currently being funded. Now, there's a saying, if you want to know where to go, follow the money. Correct? Right. So you follow the money, right? So that is another data that we studied. Okay, and then we also identify what are the future-oriented diversification of market investment that is being driven by the market player. We look at this information. For example, we look at what are the areas that is creating an innovation space. And we look at the market leader in this area choose to have control over their business strategy. That's why we are looking at, for example, Google giving their technology for free, right? They do not impose their patent to restrict others at this point of time. The question is, do you know why? Right. So we need to investigate why, right? So next. we also look at the capabilities of the technology to diverse and create cognitive aspects. Now, cognitive aspect is good, but somehow or rather it will have implications on governance and ethics. So for this, we may need to revisit whatever policies or regulation that we have put in place. Means that in the aspect of disruptive technology, whatever regulation or law that we have is not stagnant. It has to be reviewed, it has to be improvised, it has to be strategized to understand the potential impact from whatever that is generated from the disruptive technology. Right? Now, humanoids is another area that I think is being like a topic that is being quite frequently discussed, right? We are looking at the convergence of multi AI model, looking at, where will it take us? Currently, what we see that each model or training model is very specific. It's very customized based on the type of data. Now, what if in future the type of data evolve? What's going to happen? Right? Okay. Right. So to close my presentation is I would like to leave you with this question. Now, we understand that AI exploration is a competition. Now, are we looking at who is first to create an AI application market? Or are we looking at who is first to be successful in completing AI application at this point of time? I think the answer is on the second question. At this point of time, currently, everybody is competing to look at who will be the first to complete any AI application. Right? So the question that I would like to part here with you is this question. How do humans keep up with the required knowledge and skills to partake in the advancement of AI technology? That is one. Secondly, how to estimate the impact of disruptive technology? And thirdly, when or will the market shift to adopt the AI solution? Because all these questions indicates whether there will be an actual market born out of this disruptive technology. And if yes, we need to know how to address it, and we need to position whatever decision on the direction of our R&D carefully and tactfully. So with that, I end my presentation, and now we open for Q&A. Thank you.
For online audience, do post your question at the chat box. For seminar rooms audience, you may raise your question now. Thank you. Is there any question from the audience?
Yes.
What do you mean by the last question that you asked, who will be the first one going for the AI application? I mean,
Who is first to be
complete.
sorry. Who is first to be successful in completing AI application?
Yes,
Right.
because currently I've seen a lot of tools that's been created and has been commercialized to use the generative AI to
Yes.
generate a
Yes.
lot of other things.
Yes.
So when you ask who is first to successfully in completing, what do you mean?
Okay. Thank you, Samsul, for the question. Now, I would like to take you to the multiple business value chain that I showed earlier. Let me take you to the slide. Okay. Now, if you look at this value chain, this focus on the AI tools verticals. Like for example, this is related to the enterprise solution, the model and algorithm, right? This platform, these are part of the tools that is currently being developed, correct? Right? The LLM, everything, the LLM, the current training models, right? That is now being being used to render services. Yeah. 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 Mm. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Mm. Mm. That is correct. Now, for the AI applications at this point of time is related to the end user market experience. That's why we are looking at in the value chain, in the total value chain, you are looking whether it is at the downstream segment or we're looking at the midstream or the upper stream. Now, the upper stream has all the heavy duty activity related to the core technology related to all the diffusion model, the data structure, the neural network, that is the core activity, right? Then they develop the application of all this neural network and modeling and data training model, right? To look into, for example, all the activities, for example, to further process the different types of data, be it image, text, you have even like music, right? So different types of data. And these different types of data actually being used by different market players, different market users, sorry, not market players, market users. So these different market users are actually at the downstream of the economic value chain, right? Okay. So we have not seen yet, for example, what are or how does it look like in the vertical multiple industry? For example, if you're looking at healthcare, we have identified just now, healthcare, they are looking at, for example, if you look in the patent report by WIPO, have also identified that they are activities related to processing of yeah, they are processing molecules, genes, and proteins, right? But we have not seen what are the outcome or the application of these patents in the modeling of data training for molecules or for protein, right? We have not seen that yet. It's not surfaced yet, so we do not know, right? And for example, in manufacturing, we're looking at, for example, the training model being used to perhaps um, to process all the multiple data coming from the machines or transacted through the machines. We do not know how the machine is going to behave. Is it going to behave based on a rule that is being preset by the human, or the machine is enabled with a model that can create its own data on its own? We do not see that yet. Yeah. Yes.
Uh, for example, I think last year I talked to one of the people from Deloitte Singapore. So they were releasing an MES and ERP system that use the LLM as the central AI that pull all the data. So then they already start selling the services.
Yes.
So it means that you can interact with your machine and ERP system
Yes.
just that like you are chatting with the chat GPT.
Precisely.
So this is, I mean, to me, this is something that is already commercialized.
Yes. Yeah, that's true. Because if we investigate it further, for example, in the manufacturing value chain, because this is just an overview of all multiple value chain. What we need to do is to go into each of the industry value chain and to see that solution actually sits in which segment in that value chain. Then only we'll be able to understand what would be the market size for that solution in that value chain. Yeah. Then only we'll be able to identify, from that we can identify what is the contribution of revenue from that segment of that industry value chain to the total economy. Yeah. So that's how we study the impact. I'm just studying the impact. We do not know yet. It's there, but we do not know yet. And also, we do not know whether whatever current solution that is already available in the market, is it coming from technology usage or is it generated from technology creation? You know what I mean? There are many who have actually just adopt whatever solution and implement it in their current product to enhance the efficiency of their current product. But we do not know whether if those products are actually originating from a fresh, novel solution that was created using from the core AI model that was developed by them. We do not know. So that is why when we conduct the validation activity on this market product that is being offered in the market, we will investigate to see the origin of the technology that is being adopted or packaged in whatever available current product. Because we need to understand where is it coming from. Going back to the two sentence or verse which I have actually highlighted, the differences between what was it? Simon, can you go back to the first slide? Scroll down. Just scroll down. Scroll down. Yeah. Next. Oh, this is the one. Slide number 3. Slide number 3.
Before this.
Just one page up. Okay. Now, this is what that WIPO pointed out in their report. Do you know the difference between an image generated by AI from data that did not previously exist versus an AI was used in the image generation process as in image classification or in object detection, etc. The first one is an independent activity created by the intelligence capability that was created, right? Whereas the later part was an AI element that was predetermined by a rule or sets of rules. Yeah. So how do you distinguish between these two contexts to identify the level of intelligence in that technology? Yeah. So to do this, WIPO have studied all the claims and the processes that have been filed and been published, and they are be able to identify what is it that differentiate between the models that is being developed currently, is being patented currently, right? For example, if you look at, Salim, can we look at the Tencent list of technology package, the portfolio? Just go down. Lagi? No, not this one. The detailed, the donuts. Not this donut, the next one. The one with the detailed breakdown. Did you skip it? I think you, okay. The donuts. No, this is the first, okay, right. So when we conduct this analysis, for example, we'll be able to see, for example, under diffusion model, right, they have characterization, noise removing and whatnot. But when you look at here, reconstruction, they have information about prediction information, right? They have technology related to reconstruction model. And then they have information on reconstruction. Okay. But what is more interesting is to look at the generation model that Tencent have, where it is also incorporating characteristic like prediction confidence and the confidence degree. Means that the solution that they develop has the capability of being able to measure the level of confidence in the data or in the text or in the translation of the text. Yeah. 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 So this is by doing this study, we hope that we are able to highlight what are actually the intelligence aspect that has been filed, right? So that we can learn from this in our own journey to develop our own novel inventions moving forward. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Puan.
Thank you.
Phillips, do you have any last words you want to add on to the questions?
I think Azima covered it extremely well. I think there was a lot of similarity and agreement between our different talks today, especially on the kind of leading players in artificial intelligence and in digital health, and more generally from the different analysis and interpretation that you covered today. So I think it's obviously a fast-growing area. It's an underlying technology that can be applied into many different industries. And I think it needs carefully monitoring and approaching probably in a different way to many technologies in the past. So I think all the topics that Azima covered are super interesting and can be applied in many different ways to sort of national innovation strategy and also more granular ways of commercializing and developing ecosystems. So I think there's a lot to digest and consider, and I'm sure both of us would be happy to speak to any of the audience today offline about any clarifications or further discussions that either of us could help you with. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Phil.
Due to time constraint, we shall end this